Welcome back to the conversation, soulmates. All right, let's get into this. Nearly 2 decades ago, a class action lawsuit led by black farmers against the U.S. Department of Agriculture was settled. Then there was a class action from Native Americans and one from Hispanic farmers, and then women farmers filed their own.
That's right. They all allege through various years of examples that the USDA discriminated against them by denying them access to low interest rate loans and loan servicing, grant programs and assistance, causing them hundreds of millions of dollars in economic loss and record-breaking land loss through foreclosures. Now, as a part of the American Rescue Plan, the early 2020 pandemic relief bill, lawmakers approved $5 billion towards debt relief and cancellation for farmers of color. But it excluded white women and was swiftly blocked by 12 lawsuits. Now, Courtney, as a part of the Inflation Reduction Act, members slipped in a provision that repealed and replaced the original program with $3.1 billion in debt relief for economically distressed borrowers, which included, that's right, you guessed it, white borrowers. They also added another $2 billion or so for farmers who have faced discrimination. And so basically, you know, the folks in Congress sort of held hostage, you know, this piece of legislation in order to make sure that white people had access to these funds. So it was intended, you know, to support black farmers and farmers of color who have been historically discriminated against, but it was used to create access, you know, for white folks to get more money from the government. And, you know, this is, you know, our government at its worst, right? You know, there was a remedy, you know, to support folks that were being discriminated against, and it was misused in order to provide, you know, money for folks that don't need it.
You know, I had to, you know, I don't know the ins and outs. I mean, you had more specifics, but I know for me, I had to rededicate myself to discovering or rediscovering the black farmer. Because when you think, for me, when you think of farmer, and I'm about to be 52, and so, you know, coming up, when we thought of farms and you saw, you know, farmhouses, it was very much whitewashed. And, you know, I know that black people farm. I know that black people are farm. I know that historically we've always grown our own food and that whole thing. But it just, for some reason, it just never clicked that, you know, there's this whole society, if you will, a collection of black farmers who are just as intricate and just as important and contribute just as much to our food supply as other farmers, whether they be white, Hispanic, or what have you. And it just wasn't a top of mind thing. So I had to dig a little deep and even, you know, read stories on black farmers who come from black farming families, and that's all they've done, and they've been dedicated, and they've been hoodwinked and bamboozled and are owed by our government. And so I had to start there, and even to begin to relate to what their fight was or is or has been. Yeah.
And this fight, you know, continues. This fight, you know, is really about, you know, folks who allege reverse discrimination, you know, and white folks who said, well, wait a minute, we didn't have access to those dollars. And so they filed over a dozen lawsuits, you know, until they got the government to repeal and replace you know, the bill to create an access point for them.
Listen, we've been farming that land even when we didn't want to, when we were forced to. So it's been our land from jump. So get it together.
Well, speaking of getting it together, the College Board is finally breaking its silence and is firing back at the top Florida officials over the state's ban on the new AP Black Studies course. Over the weekend, the board released a statement saying that the national education nonprofit should have more quickly addressed claims that the course was indoctrinating students and lacked educational value, overall calling these claims slander. The organization also said that Florida's public and private objections had no bearing on changes that the College Board made to the final curriculum of the course, which it released earlier this month.
Oh, I know this is your thing. Have at it.
This has just been a bee in my bonnet for a long time. So the College Board now says that it should have come out more strongly against the criticisms about Florida officials sooner, and that its, quote, failure to raise our voice betrayed black scholars everywhere and those who have long toiled to build this remarkable field, end quote. That's an understatement. That's an understatement. And the fact they released a statement on a Saturday, Super Bowl
under
weekend,
the radar,
right?
Under the radar.
We see you, College Board. We see you. You could do better than that.
But
and
I continue
and I don't believe that they didn't succumb to pressure from the governor's office or from the Florida State Department of Education, because look at the changes that they made to the curriculum. I mean, they got rid of, they made Black Lives Matter optional. Folks like Kimberly Crenshaw, the 1619 Project, they've removed, these aspects of the curriculum that the governor's office happened to be opposed to, right? But but the governor's office doesn't deserve any credit. I don't know, College Board. I don't feel like they're telling us the whole truth.
So regardless of how invested you are in this conversation or not, I find it hard to believe that folks can't understand that our history, and I keep saying this, our history is American history. What is the disconnect? What is the problem with understanding that? This country was built on our backs, along with some other indigenous folks who were here before us. Like, why is that so hard? Why is that concept so hard to grasp and embrace, and then to come up with this inclusive perspective on how we go about educating everybody about the history of our country? I mean, Courtney, you can't do it without us.
Courtney, this ultimately comes down to critical thinking. And there are folks that try to dress it up and say, this is about the woke agenda. This is about critical thinking. It's about enlightenment. Truth, it's about learning from people who have different lived experiences and different perspectives, and we shouldn't fear that.
It's about the truth. And for some, it's about electric cars that seem to be the next hot topic in the automotive industry. I don't trust them just yet. But who does it really affect? Researchers are finding that major manufacturers aren't taking child labor into consideration. According to Tesla's 2021 impact report found on their website, the company has, quote, zero tolerance for child labor and has worked with a sourcing committee in the Democratic Republic of the Congo in the past to inspect the mining conditions. Experts say the reason children are primarily used for these projects is because of their size. Our mining sites generally consist of small tunnels and holes. According to Forbes, New York University and the Geneva Center for Business and Human Rights found that cobalt mining in the Congo is unsafe and are calling on companies to create safe ways, eliminating the practice and improving overall safety.
That's right. I mean, for anybody out there that is driving an electric car, this is something to think about. How do you think all the parts, have come together to allow you to enjoy your electric car? Well, this story reveals that one of those key components is cobalt, the mineral cobalt, which 80% of it can be found in the Congo. And, the fact that you got young kids, that are mining for this cobalt in conditions that are unsafe, should shock the conscience. And by the way, it's not just the Congo. There are young kids in China that are also mining for cobalt as well. And so, for everybody that's trying to be environmentally responsible and socially responsible with your electric car, this is something for you to take stock of.
I'm going to disagree with you just a bit. I don't have no problem with being conscious and aware, okay, and taking this holistic approach. But at some point, we also should be able to either trust these companies that they are operating consciously, they are operating, with humane ways of going about doing their business. And when I put down my money, I should be able to trust that, this car is coming free and clear of issues and controversies. So I think at some point, it starts up here with us needing to be able to trust these higher ups and these concept folks and these folks who are pushing, these type of agendas, that by the time it trickles down to me just as a consumer who just is fascinated by the electric car and wants to drive an electric car, that I shouldn't be taxed, if you will, with all of the issues that have come along with it. I'm not saying not to be conscious, but that shouldn't be on me, at least not all of it. Let's take some responsibility and make sure by the time I just lay out my money, I can just go be cute in my electric car.
Well, sometimes we've got to the government has got to poke and prod industry to do the right thing
and to do it more.
Well, You know, this is an opportunity for us to get this right.
There we go.
Coming up, the money in your pocket could look a little different in just a few years.
You don't say. We'll tell you about the new Black additions to the American quota when we return. You're watching Fox Soul's Black Report.